The automatic glass doors of Prestige Motors slid open with a smooth, expensive hush, welcoming visitors into a world of polished chrome, smell of rich Italian leather, and air conditioning that felt crisp like money. Into this cathedral of wealth walked Frank Abernathy. He was 63 years old, with silver stubble on his chin and hands that were rough and callous from decades of labor. He wore a faded canvas jacket stained with oil grease, jeans that had thinned at the knees, and heavy steel-toed work boots that left faint, dusty footprints on the pristine white tile floor. He didn't look like the typical clientele of Prestige Motors. He looked like the man who fixed the pipes or mowed the lawn. The showroom was buzzing with activity, salesmen in sharp blue suits sharking around potential buyers, their smiles bright and predatory. Frank stopped in front of a sleek, midnight black sedan, running a hand appreciative over the hood. It was a beautiful machine, a testament to engineering, and Frank smiled. He had built his first engine when he was 16 in a garage in Detroit, and he still appreciated the art of a well-made car. But his appreciation was about to be met with a cold, harsh reality. Before we witness the brutal humiliation and the glorious justice that followed, if you believe that respect should be given to everyone regardless of their clothes, please hit that subscribe button for Prime Stories. Join us, and let's remind the world that character matters more than currency. Frank stood by the car for 5 minutes, ignored by everyone. He watched as salesmen walked past him, their eyes sliding over him as if he were a piece of furniture that needed to be moved. Finally, he waved a hand at a group of 3 men standing near the coffee station, laughing loudly at a joke. "Excuse me," Frank said, his voice gravelly but polite. "Could I get some information on this model? Maybe take it for a test drive?" The laughter cut off instantly. The 3 men turned. They looked at Frank's boots. They looked at his jacket. They looked at each other. Then, the laughter returned, louder and sharper than before. It wasn't friendly laughter. It was the barking sound of wolves cornering a wounded animal. One of them, a man with too much gel in his hair, leaned back against the desk and smirked. "Buddy," he sneered, loud enough for the other customers to hear, "I think you're confused. This isn't a tractor dealership. This car starts at 6 figures. That means 6 zeros. Do you even know what that looks like?" Frank didn't flinch. He had faced tougher men than these soft-handed salesmen in his life. "I know how to count," Frank said calmly. "I just want to test drive the car." The second salesman stepped forward, crossing his arms over his chest in a posture of aggressive dominance. "Look, Pops," he said, pointing toward the glass doors. "The parking lot is that way. The bus stop is across the street. And a used car lot, where they sell the clunkers you might actually afford, is 3 blocks down. You are lost, and you are getting dirt on our floor." The humiliation was public now. Other customers paused their conversations to watch. A couple in the corner whispered behind their hands. Frank felt a familiar heat rise in his chest. Not shame, but a burning disappointment. He had hoped this place would be different. He had hoped that the culture of the company he was looking at was better than this. But he stood his ground, his eyes hard. "I'm a customer," Frank stated, "and I'm asking to see a car." The commotion drew the attention of the floor manager, a man named Brad. Brad walked over with a stride that screamed self-importance, his red tie a slash of color against his white shirt. He didn't ask what the problem was, he assumed it. He took one look at Frank and made a decision based on 30 seconds of visual prejudice. "Is there a problem here?" Brad barked, stepping between Frank and the luxury sedan as if protecting the car from an infection. "He's bothering the paying customers, Brad," the gel-haired salesman said, grinning. "We told him to leave, but he thinks he's buying a Phantom." Brad turned to Frank, his face twisting into a mask of disgust. "Listen, old man," he spat, stepping into Frank's personal space. "I don't know what game you're playing, but we don't have time for charity cases. You can't afford the tires on this car, let alone the car itself. Get out, now, before I call security and have you dragged out like trash." Frank looked at Brad, memorizing his face, his name tag, and the utter lack of humanity in his eyes. Security guards began to move closer, hands resting on their belts. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. People were recording on their phones, eager to capture the crazy old man getting kicked out. Just as Frank was about to turn and leave, a soft voice broke the tension. "Sir," a young woman, barely 20, stepped through the circle of mocking men. She was wearing the uniform of a junior associate, her hands trembling slightly as she held out a paper cup. I brought you some coffee. It's cold outside." She looked at Brad, terrified but determined. "And I can show you the brochure, sir, if you want. You don't have to buy anything to look." Brad spun on her. "Mia, are you out of your mind?" he screamed. "You are encouraging him. One more word to this vagrant, and you are fired. Do you hear me?" "Done." The showroom went silent. Frank looked at Mia. She was shaking, her eyes wide with fear, but she didn't retract the coffee. She offered him dignity when everyone else offered scorn. Frank took the coffee from Mia's shaking hand. The warmth of the cup seeped into his cold fingers, a stark contrast to the icy reception he had received from the rest of the staff. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the frayed edges of her sleeves, the tired circles under her eyes that suggested she was working more than one job, and a spark of genuine kindness that fear couldn't extinguish. "Thank you," Frank said softly, ignoring Brad's fuming presence. "You have no idea how much this means." He took a sip, then reached into the pocket of his greasy jacket. He pulled out a small, plain white card. It had no name, no logo, just an address and a time printed in bold black ink. "I have to go," Frank said to Mia, pitching his voice so only she could hear. "But I want you to be at this address tomorrow morning. 9:30 sharp. Don't be late." He pressed the card into her hand, turned his back on the sputtering manager, and walked out of the dealership with his head held high. Brad laughed as the doors closed. "Good riddance." And Mia, write him up as a lost cause. If you ever pull a stunt like that again, don't bother coming in. The next morning, the city of Chicago was bathed in a pale, gray light. Mia stood on the sidewalk, clutching her purse to her chest, looking up at the address on the card. It wasn't a coffee shop. It wasn't a park. It was the Titan Global Tower, a 70-story skyscraper of steel and glass that dominated the financial district. The building pierced the clouds, a monolith of power and commerce. Mia checked the card again. Skyline Suite, top floor. She felt a wave of nausea. Had the old man played a joke on her? Was she about to walk into a high-security building just to be laughed at again? But she remembered his eyes, sad, kind, and intelligent. She swallowed her fear and pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was cavernous, echoing with the footsteps of people who made more money in a day than she made in a year. She approached the front desk, her voice small. I have an appointment with, I don't actually know who. A man gave me this card." The receptionist took the card, scanned it, and her demeanor instantly shifted from polite indifference to high alert respect. "Good morning, Miss Mia. You are expected. Please, take the private elevator to the penthouse. Mr. Abernathy is waiting." Mr. Abernathy? The name meant nothing to her, but the reaction of the receptionist made her heart hammer against her ribs. She rode the elevator alone, watching the floor numbers climb higher and higher, her ears popping as she ascended toward the sky. When the doors opened, she wasn't in a hallway. She was in an office that spanned the entire floor. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city. In the center of the room sat a massive mahogany desk, and behind it stood a man looking out at the horizon. He turned as she entered. Mia gasped. It was the old man, but the grease-stained jacket was gone, replaced by a bespoke navy suit that fit him perfectly. The work boots were gone, replaced by polished leather Oxfords. He looked powerful, commanding, and utterly at home. "Good morning, Mia," Frank said, a warm smile breaking through his serious expression. "Thank you for coming." Mia stood frozen near the elevator doors, her hands clutching the strap of her bag. Mr. Abernathy," she stammered. "I don't understand. Do you work here? Did I do something wrong yesterday? Is this about the coffee?" Frank chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. He walked around the desk and gestured for her to sit. "No, Mia, you did nothing wrong. In fact, you were the only one who did something right." He leaned against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. "My name is Frank Abernathy. I am the founder and CEO of Titan Global. We own construction firms, shipping lines, and as of 3 months ago, We acquired the dealership you work at. Mia's mouth fell open. The dealership? He owned it? Yesterday, Frank continued, his voice hardening slightly. I wasn't lost. I was conducting a field test. I wanted to see how my new employees treat people who look like they have nothing to offer. I wanted to see the culture of the place I just spent millions buying. Mia felt the blood drain from her face. She thought of Brad. She thought of the insults. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Did they kick you out?" Frank nodded slowly. "They did more than that. They dehumanized me. They judged me by my boots, not my character. They failed the test, Mia. Spectacularly." He looked at her then, his gaze softening. "But you didn't. You risked your job to offer comfort to a stranger. You showed integrity when it was expensive to do so." Tears welled in Mia's eyes. I know what it's like to feel small," she admitted quietly. "My dad was a mechanic. He wore boots like yours." Frank smiled. He raised a good daughter. He checked his watch. "Come, we have a meeting to attend. The board is waiting, and I believe the management team from the dealership has just arrived." He extended an arm toward the double doors at the far end of the room. "Ready to go to work?" The double doors swung open, revealing a boardroom that looked like the war room of a nation-state. A long, polished table was surrounded by 12 executives in expensive suits, all of whom stood up in unison the moment Frank entered. "Good morning, Chairman," they chorused. Mia walked in behind him, feeling like an imposter in a land of giants. She tried to make herself small, but Frank gestured for her to sit in the empty leather chair directly to his right, the seat of honor. "Sit, Mia," he commanded gently. She sat, her heart thudding so loud she feared the room could hear it. Frank took his seat at the head of the table. "Bring them in," he said into the intercom. The side doors opened, and 4 people were ushered in by security. It was Brad and the 3 salesmen from yesterday. They looked confused, arrogant, and annoyed at being summoned to headquarters so early. Brad adjusted his red tie, looking around the room with a sneer, until his eyes landed on Frank. The color drained from Brad's face instantly. It was as if someone had pulled a plug in his feet. He staggered a step back, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. The other salesmen froze, their eyes darting from the chairman to the old man they had mocked. The recognition hit them like a physical blow. They looked at Frank's face, the same face they had laughed at, and then they looked at Mia sitting at his right hand. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy, and terrifying. Frank didn't shout. He didn't stand up. He simply pressed a button on the remote in front of him. A large screen on the wall flickered to life. It was security footage from the dealership, crystal clear audio and video. The room watched in agonizing silence as Brad screamed, "Get out, old man!" They watched the salesman laugh. They watched the cruelty unfold frame by frame. And they watched Mia step in with a cup of coffee. When the video ended, the screen went black. Frank swiveled his chair to face the 4 men standing by the door. "I have reviewed the footage," Frank said, his voice quiet but cutting through the air like a razor. "Your behavior wasn't just rude. It shattered the core values of Titan Global." Brad tried to speak, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mr. Chairman, sir, we didn't know it was you. If we had known." Frank held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "That," Frank said, his voice dropping to a growl, "is exactly the problem. You would have treated me with respect if you knew I had money. But because you thought I was poor, you treated me like trash. Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you, Brad. And you have none." Frank turned his attention to Mia. The entire room shifted their gaze to the young woman. "Mia," Frank said warmly, "from today, you're no longer a junior associate. I am promoting you to Customer Experience Director for the entire region. You will oversee the training of all staff. You will teach them what you know instinctively, that respect is the cheapest form of dignity, but its value is priceless." Mia gasped, her hands flying in her mouth. "Me? But sir, I'm just—" Frank smiled. "You are exactly what we need." Then, Frank's face turned to stone as he looked back at Brad. "As for you 4, you are suspended effective immediately, pending an investigation into your conduct. You will be demoted to the washing bay if you choose to stay. But you will never interact with a customer of mine again until Mia says you are ready. And if she says you go, you go. Brad's knees gave out. He slumped against the wall, his arrogance completely evaporated. The other salesmen looked at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Everything they had laughed at yesterday had come back to destroy them today. Frank stood up, signaling the meeting was over. The executives began to pack up, but Frank walked over to Mia, who was wiping tears from her face. "Never look down on anyone, Mia," he whispered, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You never know who they really are, or who they might become." He walked to the window, looking out over the city he had helped build, knowing that today he had built something even more important than a skyscraper. He had built justice. If you believe that kindness is free and respect is worth more than money, comment below. Respect is everything. And share this story with someone who needs a reminder that good people still win in the end.